Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with my admissions colleague, Zoe Mayfield Boykin. Zoe and I recently connected to talk about a few application tips as well as some updates from the current admission cycle. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. Remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with my admissions colleague, Zoe Mayfield Boykin. Zoe, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's always good to be back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Here we are, mid-November. Good time to check in, how things are going. How is everything with you?
Things are going well. We are well on our way in the cycle here, making some great progress on both part-time and ExecMBA classes, and big blast push here before the Thanksgiving holiday. So.
Yeah, we've got a decision release coming up next Friday, and we're a few deadlines in. I think it's always worth noting, and people always ask, is it too late to apply? We even get that question this time of year, and it's like, whoa, definitely not too late to apply. We are just getting started. Executive MBA, we have monthly deadlines, all focused on one matriculation date, August. And in part-time MBA, we've had basically monthly deadlines here through the fall. And then when we get to the winter and spring, things will spread out a little bit more, but still plenty of opportunity to apply. And we typically will work on these classes until the summer months. At least that's been our experience over the past few years. How do you help people think about what's a good time to apply?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and my biggest piece of advice is I always encourage people to take advantage of the application round that they feel they have the most complete application that they can. Now, there is certainly some benefit to applying earlier in our cycle as opposed to later. One of those benefits is that the sooner you know that you have a decision from us, hopefully a positive decision, the sooner you can start to socialize that decision with people in your lives, and so supervisor, your family, your friends, a partner, spouse, whoever it might be, because it is a big decision to go back to school. But all of our rounds, we intend to admit qualified candidates in all of the rounds that we have. And so submitting an application they feel most complete and is the best representation of them is always my biggest rule of thumb for when to apply.
Yeah, I always encourage candidates to think about, well, when they press submit on their application, what's going to allow them to feel confident that they're putting forward their strongest application. For some candidates, it's right now, here in the fall. Other candidates, they feel like they need a little bit more time. It's probably going to be the winter. There's still other candidates who think maybe spring, summer. And that's why we have the deadline structures that we have to accommodate that diversity of timing. Always encourage folks, if you have specific questions about the application process, join us for an application or inside the application session. We host these on a monthly basis. They are combined sessions for part-time MBA and executive MBA. The application processes themselves are really pretty similar in terms of what's required and how the process works. We also make ourselves available for in-person chats, just small group conversation, as well as one-on-one conversation. So you can connect directly with an admissions committee member. Curious how you encourage folks to get ready for those one-on-one chats, because in my mind, I always want folks maybe have done a little bit of research to know a little bit about the program so that we're having a higher level conversation, or I guess more detailed conversation, I guess is the way to think about that. How do you encourage folks to get ready for those conversations?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with your point about doing research on their own prior to coming to the discussion. We're happy to answer questions that folks might have, but we have a lot of information out there on the website. We also offer webinars on a pretty regular basis. 5 things to know about the Executive MBA program, 5 things to know about the part-time MBA program. Those webinars are a great place to start, just to get a high-level overview of the program structure. What would be expected of you as a student, what you can hope to get out of the program, and then from there, again, the website is just a tremendous resource in terms of understanding some of the more details of the program, as well as elements of the application itself. So when folks have kind of taken those 2 steps, I find that our conversations are much more fruitful. I'm able to answer more specific questions related to, where they are in the process, where they are in their career. And really, I try to be helpful on a much more personalized basis, as opposed to providing higher level admissions information. But I'm always happy to answer additional questions about our program as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're always happy to clarify questions, and that's not a problem. But we want to be as helpful as we can. And you have an opportunity to speak to an admissions committee member, 25, 30 minutes. Make the most of that opportunity. And we do share a lot of resources in advance. So if you schedule one of those conversations, you'll get an email with a bunch of links. And we've aggregated those links because these links align with things that are oftentimes we found on candidates' minds as they're considering these programs. So be sure to check those out. So, Zoe, I want to give you a little bit of time. Obviously, you work really closely on managing our application process. And when we were talking about the idea for this podcast, we thought it would be helpful to kind of maybe answer a few questions or share some insights about things that we've gotten questions about over the course of the cycle so far, or just things that we've noticed in the application process that could be helpful for candidates to hear a little bit more insight about. So, let's talk about what's required to apply for the executive MBA or part-time MBA program. Where do you see candidates kind of get hung up in the application process?
Yeah. So, from my vantage point, I spend a lot of time with candidates as they are before application, during, and then, of course, afterwards as they're making their decision. But where I see the biggest bottleneck or snag is really around submitting a transcript. So, we require unofficial transcripts from all degree related coursework here at Darden at the time of application. So, by unofficial, I mean that you're welcome to upload a copy, a PDF, a screenshot. Directly into your application, and we will consider that record as we were making our decision. One thing to note about an unofficial transcript and uploading it yourself is that if you can't read it, either can we. But what I also want to shed some light on is the notion that it's all degree related coursework. So what I mean by that is that any credit that you have used towards a degree, we are going to want to see a transcript from that credit. So if your transcript has transfer credit on it, maybe from the degree granting institution, we will need to see the transcript from the original place where that transfer credit came from. So if you maybe took courses at a community college prior to matriculating to a four-year college, maybe you took a summer course trying to get caught up, or maybe get ahead in completing your bachelor's degree, or maybe it was a master's degree, another master's degree, we're going to need the transcript that those credits originally initiated from as well to accompany the degree granting transcript. So all degree related coursework, often folks will submit a transcript from where they received their degree, but they leave out the transfer credit degree coursework. So please include those transcripts as well. That will help us move you through the process much more quickly.
Yeah, that's a great example of you started school at one place and then you ultimately earned your degree from another place. We would require both transcripts, as you noted. I also share with folks sometimes people start coursework towards a degree and ultimately don't finish the degree, but they were doing that coursework with a degree intended. And so we would ask for that transcript as well. And it just helps give us a full picture of your academic experience. When we're thinking about your application, we're really thinking about kind of three key dimensions. There's the academic, the professional, and the personal. And so on the academic, from an applicant standpoint, what you're trying to do is give the admissions committee information that will allow us and evidence that will allow us to say, you know what, on the basis of this information, we think this person can be successful here. And, if we were to admit them to the program, they can do the coursework that they're going to be asked to. Quantitative courses, qualitative courses, we're putting them in a position to be successful by admitting them to the program. And so it's in your best interest for us to have the fullest picture possible, but it is one of those things that slows the application process down. And when I think about another slow part of the application process, maybe this is less of like missing materials, more so just something that takes a little bit of time is the recommendation process, which these are busy people. You're typically asking your supervisor. I always encourage candidates to give your recommender at least a couple weeks to work on their recommendation. Not that it takes 2 weeks to respond to our recommendation, but again, these are just busy people with a lot on their plate. So, any tips for people as they approach the recommender?
Yeah. So, a few things to know about a recommendation process is that it's actually not a letter. It's a form that your recommender will fill out, and the form will ask three key questions, which is number one, how do you know the candidate? Number two, how does this candidate compare to their peers? And number three, what's a piece of critical feedback that you've provided the candidate? And so that gives you an insight into maybe who you might think about asking for that recommendation. The other thing to note about the recommendation is that it's electronically linked to your application. So I see lots of folks will sometimes wait until their recommender has submitted their portion of the application. There's no need to do that. You can go ahead and submit whenever your application is complete. And when your recommender completes their portion, they will automatically be linked on our end. As Brett, you just shared, the recommendation tends to be the longest portion of the process. And so So we recognize that it is out of your control as an applicant. So we will certainly do our best to try to be a little bit flexible, sometimes beyond the application deadline day, to accommodate those recommendations that might be coming in a little bit late. But please don't hesitate to submit your application when your portion is ready. And like I said, the recommendation will be linked automatically when they go ahead and submit their portion.
Yeah, I mean, there's of course the one part of your application you're not filling out yourself too, I think is the other piece of that. So a little bit of a dance there for applicants. We don't require a standardized test. We oftentimes will get asked that. We are test optional for both executive MBA and part-time MBA. But if someone's planning to take a standardized test, that also tends to be a little bit of a slower process too. It's really more the preparation time. But when we think about the things that might sort of slow somebody down, it's really kind of maybe missing materials, missing transcripts, and maybe even a missing recommendation. We do give people a little bit of a buffer though. So you want to talk a little bit about we have the application deadline, but sometimes a little bit more flexibility beyond that.
Yeah, so we try to make this process as seamless and as personalized as possible. So, leading up to a deadline, you will hear from me directly, checking in, seeing if I can be helpful in any way. And as as we shared, because you don't control the recommendation portion of the application, we are always willing to give a few extra days. And we just ask that you reach out, let us know what's going on. You can respond to that email that you'll receive from me directly, and we are happy to be accommodating. And I think what's also important to know is particularly as we are at this point in the cycle, we have many more deadlines. And so let's say we aren't able to accommodate your application because of a timing issue in this cycle in this round. We will just happily move your application over to the next round, and we will move forward then once we have all the materials. But we get it. Our applicants are working professionals. There's a lot on everyone's plate, but check in with us. Keep that open line of communication, and we're always happy to be flexible where we can.
Right, Zoe. Well, thank you for those tips. I want to now transition to talk a little bit about work disruption and applying to a working professional program. And I know this has been on our minds because we're based here in the DC area. There's a lot that's happening here in the DC area. We had people who've been laid off, lost their job, but still interested in advancing their career, still interested in an executive MBA or a part-time MBA. And as we talk to candidates, it occurred to me maybe people are not sure how to talk about this experience of being between things. And maybe we could help some people out here just by saying, here's some things to think about. People are always curious about the makeup of our classes. And so about two-thirds of our executive MBA class will come from within about 60 miles or so of our location here in Roslyn. So we definitely have people from the DMV, but we have typically 15 to 17 states of residency representing the executive MBA class. Part-time MBA, 85, 90 plus percent of the students come from within 30 miles or less of our location in Roslyn. So a very local audience. And that just has to do with the evening weeknight schedule. But I have started to think as we've met people over the past kind of, 6, 9 months, that people really aren't sure how to talk about this experience or not even sure that they should talk about the experience. And so what's a tip that you might share with folks if they're between things, if they lost their job, they're looking at a work professional program, where would you encourage them to start telling their story?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is that our intention in our admissions process is to understand you as the candidate in the entirety of who you are in your story, and where you are professionally is just part of your story at this moment. And so, my best advice is to always be very transparent about that piece of your story, whether you were laid off from a role, you're in between things, you're maybe coming back into the workforce from taking some time off. Maybe for family or other reasons. But we want to hear about that. And I think the more that you can provide context as to where you are professionally, where you hope to go and what steps you've taken to get there, the more that we can have a better understanding of whether this program is really the right step for you as you make that next step. But my best advice is always for folks to be up front about it and forthcoming as opposed to sort of shying away from it, because the reality is, like, we are human. We don't exist. This process doesn't exist in a vacuum. We are also, we are DC Metro based up here in Arlington, and we are living a lot of what many of our candidates are living too. And so we can certainly be sensitive to that. But the best rule of thumb, as I said, is really just to be forthcoming, and really be upfront about what's happening with your career at this moment.
Yeah, being transparent allows you to kind of control the conversation and just be able to share more about it. Whereas if you don't talk about it and we get to someone's application and we see there's a gap, we're like, gosh, well, why didn't they say something about that in the interview? It sure would have been nice to hear more about that. And you may be surprised that the interviewer doesn't know this. Well, it's because in our interview process, the interviewer does not read the applicant's application in preparation for the interview. They also do not have a copy of the applicant's resume in front of them. And your interviewer will tell you this. But if you're between things or returning to the workforce, all the things that Zoe mentioned, you should come prepared to talk about it because it really allows you to speak directly to it, to give more information and context. And that's really what's going to help the admissions committee. I think sometimes people get hung up on the fact that these are working professional programs. So if you're not working, you worry that maybe this isn't right for you. We've seen a lot of different kinds of people in a lot of different stages of life, a lot of different things happening in our application processes. We have always, at least over the past few years, we've always had a few people apply who are between jobs or looking for a job. We understand that. What's more important is what you're sharing, not only about where you are in that process, but what you hope to do and kind of giving the sense of forward momentum and that you're looking to find a job because these programs, of course, are not designed to be done as full-time programs, right? They're best when you are working and pursuing the degree at the same time. The other thing I'll just underscore for folks is that we have an expectation of employment. We do not have a hard requirement for employment. And so, again, so much of this is going to center on the narrative that you're sharing through your application materials and the interview process, and really helping us understand kind of where you are in this journey, and are you looking for something, and what does that something look like, and where are you on that timeline and process. Those are going to be key parts of your story. And to Zoe's point, I loved how you said it. We're human too. Like, well, that's the nice thing is that you're actually dealing with humans who are interested in your story. We're interested in helping people at the end of the day. That's really what this is endeavor is about: expanding opportunities for students, expanding their aperture. And so we want to hear your story. The best way to share it is to be as open and transparent as you can. Anything else that comes to mind? So when you think about this, maybe folks who are applying kind of between things.
Yeah, I would say if you are offered an opportunity to interview, we interview by invitation only in our process. But if you are offered an opportunity to interview, being as specific as possible about the steps that you have taken. So maybe you are in conversation with an employer. We want to hear about that. We want to hear the name of the employer, the role. We know that you won't really have a full picture of what that role might be until you get into it. But as much as you do know, providing that context is really helpful for us. Again, as we think about your story in its entirety when making a decision. So being specific and transparent are always really helpful.
Yeah, I really think the interview is such a great opportunity for a student to deepen our understanding of what they've introduced to the application process. I always encourage candidates to think about the application as an initial introduction to who you are. And, in the application, let's say you are between jobs and you're in the search process, we do have an additional comment section of the application, which can be space for you to speak to anything that you think is maybe not clear on its face or on the surface, or that you think would benefit from additional context. Only 250 words, so there is a limit. But let's say you lost a job recently and you're applying. That would be a good use of the additional comment section. To Zoe's point, you could begin to share some more details there. And of course, you could build on that in the interview process too, right? Because it's a 30, 35-minute conversation with a member of our admissions committee. It's really a great chance for you to share all the things that you've accomplished, where you'd like to go, and to bring us into your consideration process. We're trying to get a sense in the interview of a lot of different things, but certainly of those things that are harder to judge from the application itself, right? How you communicate, how you might show up in a classroom, how you might relate to your classmates and teammates, all of those things that, again, can be a little bit harder to judge just on the face of the application itself. All right, so Zoe, let's talk about one more thing here. So we get a fair number of questions, I think, every year, but maybe a slight uptick this year in the number of people who are asking about doing a working professional versus a full-time program. Full-time program being, of course, a residential program where you take 2 years off. Working professional program being you continue to work while pursuing your degree. So working professional versus full-time, how do people decide which one is the right fit? What's one thing that you encourage people to kind of think about as they're weighing this decision?
Yeah, I encourage people to think first carefully about the differences, right, between a work professional program and a full time program. When you're in a full time residential program, one of the key aspects of that program is going to be the summer where you have an opportunity to do an internship. And so that is a chance for you to maybe branch out, do something you haven't done before, try it out, see if that's what you would like to pursue. In a working professional program, because you're working professionals, and the idea is that you'll be working full time while pursuing your MBA. A internship is not going to be a part of those programs. And so, you might want to think carefully about what it is that you hope to accomplish, what it is that you want to get out of an MBA, and whether that internship is going to be key to getting there. There are some industries certainly where that's very crucial. If you would like to make a step into that industry, where an internship is going to be required almost, and there are others where it's not so much. And so that's a big piece that I always encourage people to think about. The other piece that I think maybe goes a little bit understated, but I do want to mention here is that, if you're in a role where you are, maybe you feel challenged, you feel like you're growing, you feel like you have a lot of support from your supervisor, maybe you're on a team that you really like, those things should not be taken for granted. And there's a lot of opportunity to continue to kind of grow your skill set while continuing to maintain that environment, continuing to grow professionally. And so sometimes the answer is not to leave that professional environment. Sometimes the answer is to continue in that professional environment while also pursuing your MBA. So I think you really have to take stock of what it is that you want, what your goals are, what you would like to accomplish, and then maybe kind of some of the pros and cons of your working situation currently.
Yeah, it certainly think about where you are work-wise. Would taking 2 years off cost you momentum? There's also a financial dimension to this. We certainly hear that from candidates, right? To forgo a paycheck may not necessarily make sense for everyone. The thing I really enjoy about this conversation, though, is you have nothing but great options, right? Everybody ends up in the same place. Everybody graduates the same degree here. So it's really just trying to figure out which of these options makes most sense for you. And I always tell folks, it's not a pro or con thing. It's really just trade-offs, right? It's true that you can't have the full-time experience, the fully residential experience in our working professional programs. And you shouldn't come to the executive MBA or part-time MBA program looking for that. It's going to be a bit different because everybody's working. But you also can't have the working professional student experience in the full-time MBA program. So it's trade-offs and really thinking about your own priorities. What's most important to you, your career momentum, the financial dimensions, what makes sense for you, the experience that you want to have. That's his always point. The internship piece is a big part of it. When you think about working professional programs, one of the really nice things is that you're able to take what you're learning in class and apply it in real time at work, right? That happens all the time, particularly when you're learning in a case-based environment like you are at Darden. It's not a huge leap to figure out, oh, how you might use this, on Monday at that meeting or leverage it at your next team meeting. Um, our full-time MBA students have to wait a little bit longer to kind of feel that payoff, their internship or after graduation. So again, just trade-offs. There's not necessarily one size fits all approach here. I think this is where conversations can be really helpful. I think this is also where something like a class visit could be really helpful. We have full-time MBA class visits, we have part-time MBA and executive MBA class visits. One of the nice things, Zoe, when I think about the class visits is not only do you get to observe the class and see what the case method looks like in action, right? It's just a class observation. You won't be participating, but it will still give you a flavor of what the classroom dynamic is like. But you also get to talk with current students. What what do you like about the class visits? How do you think they can be helpful to a prospective student?
I think what's the greatest thing about a class visit is it allows students to put themselves literally in the shoes of a working professional student. We invite you to, if it's a part-time MBA class visit, you're coming in the evening, class that's going to start around start at 6 p.m. So you will probably be coming from work. And then if it's executive MBA class visit, you'll be joining us on a Saturday during one of those weekend residencies. And you put yourself in the shoes of a student. It's a low stakes way to just observe. You're just a fly in the wall. And I really think that the ability to connect with our current students during those visits is invaluable. Our students we kind of give you all some space to interact with those students, and we don't tell them what to say or how to say it. We let them sort of share their own experience authentically. And I think that's really important to hear from the folks who are actually living it on a day-to-day basis. And so, you know, there's a lot of ways in which we in admissions describe, the case method, the community, our program elements here at Darden. But I really don't think I think it doesn't live up to actually seeing it and being in the space with the students, with the faculty in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we consistently hear from visitors here in Roslyn, people do have questions. Like, they know that Darden's main grounds is down in Charlottesville, and they're curious about what's happening here in Roslyn. We have 40,000 square feet, top of an office tower, incredible views, all of those things, but they're curious about the community and how students engage with each other and what it feels like. And I think to a person, when they come to visit, they find it's way more active, way more vibrant, way more engaging than they thought it would be. Because sometimes people use this language of like a satellite or a remote campus. I would not use that language to describe what's happening here. This is very much a grounds too. It is a grounds for our working professional students. We have over 500 students here. I always remind folks like we had our first students taking class in the Washington, D.C. metro area in the fall of 2016. We had 60 executive MBA students in a section here. You go from that moment to now, it's less than 10 years. We now have 3 working professional programs, all based here in the Washington, D.C. area, executive MBA, part-time MBA, and a specialized master's, MS in business analytics. You add up all of those programs enrollment, you have over 500 students, and that's in less than 10 years. I think people are always a little bit surprised by the scale, like they didn't realize there were that many students here or something. Do you find that people are surprised by that?
People are absolutely surprised by the scale, and I think people are still learning that we're here. They're like, "Wow, I didn't realize I could do this MBA thing. I could do it right here locally if they are local to us in the DC metro area." So we are here, as you said, we've been here since 2016, and we educate a lot of students out of this space, and something that we're really proud of. So
Yeah, and people are always asking us, how is Darden connected to the DC Metro? Like, what are the benefits of being up here? And it's like, how much time do we have for this conversation? Because there's so many alums here, right? This is it's the largest alumni chapter for both Darden as well as UVA. We have all kinds of, we'll go to employers and students have a chance to connect with employers out in the community. We also have networking events here. We have speaker series. Just last night, we had I think the CEO of Cava was here as well as the head of McKinsey's Mid-Atlantic division. We have speaker series like that. We have conferences. We have the Venture Capital Conference here last spring, an AI conference here last year. We just had a defense conference that was coordinated by one of our part-time MBA students. Like being here just gives so much access. Not to say that people don't come to Charlottesville. Absolutely, there are things happening down there, but we are right here, like less than a mile from the District of Columbia, one metro stop away. Like it's a lot. It's very easy for people to get here and to come and to spend time with our students.
it's great.
All right. Well, Zoe, any final thoughts? Any final tips for folks as they think about maybe working on their application?
I mean, I think my final thoughts are as usual. Please reach out to us. Allow us to be a resource as you're thinking about taking this next step, as well as the all of the resources we offer between webinars, in person, virtual events. I really think all of that is part of the application process. You are information gathering. And if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team.
Yeah, hopefully the one thing that's come through in this conversation is that we're here to help and we welcome your questions, whether it's general inbox kind of question or you schedule a conversation or you join us for an in-person event or a webinar. We're here to help. We want you to have all the information that you can make, that you need to make an informed decision. And so hopefully we'll see you again soon, Zoe. Thank you as always for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And that was my conversation with Zoe Mayfield Boykin, Associate Director of Admissions for Professional Degree Programs here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.